Whistling 5 Anarchic Productions proudly presents Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s stories, as told by Andrew Brammer. Hello and welcome. The story you are about to hear is written and told using its original source materials, scribblings and scratchings from the scrawls of Stumpy, found within Stumpy Sanderson's time capsule, which was buried in 1979 and then unearthed in 2019. The story is told in the first person, as I, just like Stumpy, witnessed at first hand the momentous events which it recounts. So let's park up our rally choppers and tomahawks and take a ride back to 1976 for Puffer Suspended. Time for a wild hoedown, folks. For the truck-making town of Dunstable, the early and mid-1970s were lawless times, with mean and wild streets fought over by marauding gangs riding rally choppers and tomahawks. These gangs were armed to the teeth with potato-firing pistols, rifles, and other tuber-projecting armaments, for this was the era of the First and Second Spud Gun Wars. By the early summer of 1976, events had reached a boiling and seething point. Paperboys were routinely ambushed by spud gun-wielding desperados. School tuck shops were held up in daring raids, and innocent bystander schoolfolk found themselves caught up in the middle of potato crossfire. Then, at the height of the Second Spud Gun War, strange whispers and rumours began to swirl amidst the fog of war, telling of the development by the Keenan Gang of a monstrous spud cannon, capable of firing a whole bag of potatoes in one shot, and whose range and explosive capacity was the spud gun equivalent of the German Big Bertha cannon. A spud cannon that was known as El Monstruo. At last, the true tale of this weapon, this stuff of legend, can be told. Keep those wagons rolling, doggone spuds. It was the hot summer half-term, and amongst the hills, cowfields and trees of Blows Downs, we had just finished the most productive of mornings. For our final practice session for the following day's planned spud gun battle had gone like clockwork. So we all now stood, delighted with our exploits, and fully confident in our readiness for the ensuing battle. The training session had lasted some 3 hours or so, and had involved me, Stumpy Sanderson, Puffer Patterson, Bendy Henderson, and Stephen Brookman, engaging in rigorous static target practice, camouflaged stealth manoeuvres, and the perfecting of our battle tactics. Our session had also included our first use of the new weapons that Brookman had procured from the mysterious mail order firm in Vladivostok, from which he regularly obtained his nefarious supplies. Armaments which would give us a massive advantage in the following day's battle. These weapons were special 6-shooter repeater spud pistols, each with an extended range, which meant that for every single shot spud pellet fired at us by our enemies, we would have the firepower to pelt them with 6 shots each before they had a chance to reload. As Brookman had procured 2 pistols for each of us, this meant our shooting capability was going to be prodigious. Coupled with the fact that we would be backed up in battle by other allies, providing us with cavalry support on their rally tomahawks, we were supremely confident that tomorrow we would be crowned the undisputed Spud Kings. As our training finished, we all looked around in pride at each other. Me and Stumpy both sporting black cowboy hats and our twin-holstered spud revolvers. Puffer's plump and portly figure looking resplendent and besuited in a perfectly fitted long-tailed jacket, a fine waistcoat and accompanying fob watch, topped off with a Louisiana steamer gambler's hat, and who, as well as his twin spud guns, carried a small Derringer-type spud pistol in his belt. Bendy, in a 10-gallon hat, and who carried a long-range sniper's spud rifle in addition to his pistol, and Brookman, who, to massively supplement his repeating pistols, carried a whole array of spud-firing armaments, and who, with his freckled face, round-rimmed Trotsky glasses, and swept-back Chairman Mao hair, was wearing his trusty Che Guevara green fatigues and Fidel Castro revolutionary cap. With comrades such as us, how could we lose? Tomorrow's battle was going to be no walk in the park, though. And we all knew what lay ahead of us. For we would be facing some formidable and long-standing foes. Amongst them, the notorious Milton Sisters Gang. And also, potentially the most deadly of all our enemies, the Keenan Gang. A gruesome bunch of rogues led by their brute of a leader, Shane Keenan, and who, it was rumoured, had developed that most fearsome of weapons, El Monstruo, the spud-firing cannon, something which we had to date tried to laugh off with bravado, and which we still believed was nothing more than a huge bluff. So there we were, our practice session finished, and we now began making our way back home across the bottom of the downs, walking along the train line that only a few times a day carried the Blue Circle cement trains. As we reached the railway bridge that crossed over the top of Skimpot Road, for some reason the always inquisitive Bendy, with his tall beanpole height advantage, decided to look over the side of the bridge and, in a sudden fit of extreme excitement, shouted, "There's a fiver down there!" "What?" we all cried. "There's a fiver floating in that drain water." We all rushed to the side of the blue steel bridge, Puffer, Stumpy and me straining somewhat because of our comparatively smaller height. Surely not! It couldn't be! But yes, without a doubt, there below, lying in the flooded drain water, which was a common occurrence underneath that bridge due to a long-standing drainage problem, was indeed a floating £5 note. This was incredible, although we didn't care how on earth it had got there. For now our collective eyes were all going round in our heads like the dials on a slot machine, and we were all filled with thoughts and temptations of how much we could buy with that £5 note. All those bottles of Cresta, packets of Guard cigarettes, Horror Crisps, Kung Fuis, Aztec, Caramello and Golden Seville bars. The mouth-watering list was endless. There was just one problem: how to reach the fiver, for there was no access down from the bridge to the road itself. Immediately, Brookman had one of his brainwaves. "You know the old swing that hangs in the trees back there? We'll pull it down, use the rope from it, and lower one of us down who can then grab the fiver." "Brilliant!" we all shouted. And so, 10 minutes later, Puffer stood, lassoed and trussed up in the rope, ready to be lowered, for we all felt with his roly-poly figure he was the most buoyant and best suited of us to the task at hand. The plan was thus for us to lower Puffer over the blue steel riveted bridge, and then, as he approached the stagnant and foul-smelling drain water and the fiver, he would propel his rotund figure forward like a weeble, lean forward and pick up the prize, and we would then pull him back up. We thus started, slowly lowering him, all four of us holding onto the rope. Down Puffer went. 15 feet. 10. 5. 2. And then, projecting his plump arms out in front of him, he used his portly figure to swing and rotate forward like a perfectly weighted and well-oiled pendulum, reached down, and with one podgy swoop, grabbed our treasure. "Got it, my friends?" A smooth, successful and slick operation, and we now started to haul the bobbing Puffer back up, Heave! Heave! 15 feet, 10 feet. But then, with only what must have been 5 feet still to go, and as we put a huge final effort in, we suddenly felt huge resistance and found that we could pull the rope no more. We tried again. Heave! Nothing. Bendy leaned forward, rope still in hand, peering over the bridge. It's snagged, he shouted. It's caught on one of the rivets. And sure enough, as we all now peered over, we could see that the rope had indeed got stuck on one of the rough, rusty rivets of the peeling blue steel bridge, leaving Puffer hanging like some suspended Humpty Dumpty. With his long arms, Bendy tried to prise the rope free, but it just wouldn't budge. Suddenly, at this precise moment, a dreadful shrieking and a hollering filled the air, followed by equally blood-curdling shouts of "Charge!" While still holding onto the rope that held the suspended Puffer, we looked around, stunned, and as one shouted, "The Milton Sisters Gang!" In the near distance, we saw the fearsome sight of all 8 of the gang, whooping like Comanches, feathers in their hair and herring towards us, led by those formidable Roman-nosed warriors Mandy and Melanie Milton, all armed to the teeth with spud guns, and then splitting off into 2 groups of 4, obviously planning to make their deadly charge at us on 2 fronts. These mortal enemies looked like they were armed with a full stock of ammunition, unlike us, who were now desperately short of potatoes, having used up almost our entire armoury in our earlier practice session. The awful realisation dawned on us. Was this to be our Alamo, Tippy Canoe, and Custer's Last Stand all rolled into one? Brookman, his thinking as quick as lightning as usual, instantly sprang into action. "OK, lads, we're going to have to fight this out, but we must also try to retrieve Puffer. Bendy, you'll have to take the rope and hold on to Puffer in case by some miracle the rope breaks free. Hold on, Bendy. Hold on, Puffer. Us others, load up and fire." And so that's how we spent the next 10 minutes or so. Brookman, Stumpy and I just managing to keep the swirling marauders at bay with the superior range and loading capabilities of our 6 shooters. Stumpy and I shooting our pistols and frantically reloading, Brookman pulling weapons and firing from every part of his anatomy. But the Milton sisters and their cohorts were playing an evil game, drawing our fire, seemingly sensing that we were all running out of ammo as their circling of us drew ever nearer. Meanwhile, Bendy had turned the colour of an anemic beetroot as he strained to hold the bobbing Puffer, while poor Puffer himself was suspended and swinging like a Louisiana gambler bedecked marionette, but now fully aware of the battle we were fighting, and being our school's greatest actor, could only shout his trussed thespian's encouragement to us. "Stay in the fight, boys! Stay in the fight! And by Jove, if you can get me up to join you, I will show those baying Milton sisters the deadliness of my spuds." For Brookman, Stumpy and I, though, the situation was getting ever more desperate. For the Milton Sisters Gang were now so close that we could see the terrifying war-painted features of Mandy and Melanie and their 2 main henchmen, Slugger Carson and Tin Ribs Wilson. As the cordite smell of our cap-firing spud guns filled the air, we were also now beginning to take painful hits. Then an even more ominous development. For suddenly all of us, we and the Milton Sisters Gang, now heard a low and ominous explosive boom, quickly followed by the sighting of a plume of black smoke which seemed to be coming from the top of Laporte's field, only a few hundred yards down Skimpot Road, over which Puffer was still suspended. "What the devil was that?" shouted Brookman. In the momentary lapse in proceedings, we all began to horribly contemplate. Was that the boom of potato artillery? Then we heard the bone-chilling sound, a mixture of rumbling and clanking that was, with increasing speed, coming up Skimpot Road, followed by a horrified revelatory exclamation from Puffer, It exists! It exists! El Monstruo exists! Brookman, Bendy, who was still straining at the rope, Stumpy and I, and the Milton Sisters Gang all looked desperately across the bridge and watched in horror as we saw 10 members of the Keenan Gang heading up the road towards us, led by Shane Keenan, with his malevolent, fluid-filled sack of a face, all of them adorned with twin potato ammunition belts crisscrossed across their chests, spud rifles strapped to their backs, wearing sombreros, and pushing an abominable contraption that looked like a cross between a giant-wheeled blunderbuss and an old quarrying cannon. 3 of the gang were carrying huge sacks of spuds. We knew they couldn't get to us, as there was no access up. But at that very moment, and we still do not know to this day how it happened, perhaps it had been the constant pulling from Bendy, the rope-holding puffer suddenly freed itself from the rough steel rivet on which it had snagged, resulting in poor Bendy, who was by now near exhaustion, letting the rope slip through his hands and causing Puffer to rapidly drop to just 2 feet above the drain water. This was seen by the Keenan Gang, from whom now a great blood-curdling roar went up. "Look! It's Patterson!" And with that they rapidly accelerated the trundling of the monstrous cannon, running and pushing with glee until they stopped within a 15 yards range of Puffer, and with faces full of wicked delight began pouring a whole sack of spuds into the cannon. As we looked over the bridge, we could see Puffer frantically tilting forward and backwards, desperately trying to reach for his pistols. As they were now amidst us, and were also looking over the bridge, the Milton Sisters Gang had seen this too, and were clearly astounded by what they could see. "What's Patterson down there for?" Quick as a flash, Brookman saw an opening, and like any good communist, rapidly turned to capitalist principles. "He's got a £5 note down there, which we found in that flood puddle. And so, to the noble warriors of the Milton Sisters Gang, we offer this. We will give you this £5 to share amongst yourselves if you can all lend us a hand to pull poor Puffer up." A brilliant masterstroke. OK, we would lose our £5 and would be entering an unholy alliance with sworn enemies. But we would be saving poor Puffer from a fate worse than death. We quickly saw too the thought of a £5 and what they could buy with it flash through the Milton Sisters Gang's eyes. Deal! And with that, we all grabbed hold of the rope, and, with an almighty heave, began to raise Puffer, who was now swinging like a plump carcass on a gibbet. But despite the multiple resources at our disposal, we were too late. For next there was a huge resounding boom of artillery, and then a squeal of horror and pain as a whole volley of potatoes hit the portly Puffer full on in his ample midriff. "Boys, I'm hit! They've got me! They've got me, my lads!" Even amidst the tuber-induced agony, Puffer was still managing to die a death worthy of an Oscar. "Good night, good night! Parting is such sweet sorrow. Farewell, my great friends. Adieu." We knew from his strained, dramatic tones that Puffer was nearing the end and couldn't hold on for much longer, particularly when we heard the Keenan Gang roar, "Reload, lads! One more shot and he's ours!" This galvanised us into one final heave, and with that we pulled Puffer back over the side of the bridge and to safety, just as the next awful boom resounded from El Monstruo, and a volley of spuds flew over our heads, as well as ricocheting off the side of the bridge. Exhausted, we all leaned against the side of the bridge, as Puffer, laid out on the floor and bruised and tender like a pummelled plum, began to slowly wheeze to his feet. It was Slugger Carson who spoke on behalf of his chiefs, the Milton Sisters. "Where's the £5, Patterson?" As we all looked at Puffer, Stumpy, Bendy, Brookman and I, now horribly realised as one that in that terrible moment of his parting soliloquy, when he had first been hit, that whilst swinging from the bridge, Puffer had been so flamboyant with his thespian's arms that he had let go of the £5 note, which had duly floated back down into the foul drain water and was now, at that very moment, being retrieved by the Keenan Gang, and which would give them enough income to fund months' worth of spuds for El Monstruo. Looking at each other with their evil faces, and then at us, the Milton Sisters Gang slowly loaded their spud guns, and all 8 of them lined up in front of us in firing squad fashion. With the smell of fear filling our nostrils, we horribly realised we were all out of luck, all out of time, all out of spud. As they cocked their spud guns, Mandy Milton gave the order to aim, and we knew it was going to be a long, hot summer. Thank you for listening to this episode of Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s Stories. And don't forget to listen out for Stumpy and Gang's next adventure. For further information on all things Stumpy Sanderson, please visit www.stumpysanderson.co.uk. And you can also check out the Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s Stories YouTube channel. But before we saddle up again on our rally choppers and tomahawks, let's take a listen to the strange little song that was specially written by Stumpy to accompany this podcast's tale. This song is performed for us now by Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s acoustic archive. Let's rock!
Time for a wild hold-down, folks. Louisiana gambler, 3 sharpshooters, revolutionary, Che Guevara fatigues. What's he doing here? Spud gun wars. First and second, spud gun wars. Comanches, Comancheros, desperados, Mexican bandits. Spud gun wars. First and second, spud gun wars. Missouri River approaching. This is a raid. This is a stick-up. This is a raid. This is a stick-up. Keep those wagons rolling, boys. Potatoes. We need potatoes. More potatoes. King Edward potatoes. For a spud gun walls. Doggone spuds. First and second, spud gun walls. First and second, spud gun walls. Yeehaw! Take your spud guns in your hand and fire them into enemy land. Yeehaw! Take your spud guns in your hands and fire them into enemy land. Yes, sirree! Fill your hands, you son of a spud. Spud gun was. That sure was one heck of a hoedown, boys.